Welcome to the June 14th Planning Board meeting in the town of Raymond. The Planning Board will come to order. I don't have a gavel, but that'll work. The board does have a quorum, and we'll start with roll call, starting with Patricia.
Tricia Beaton.
Sheila Burke.
Greg Foster.
Kyle Bancroft.
Ed Kranich.
And we also have our planner, Jim Seymour, our code officer, Chris Hansen, recording secretary, Mary, and our lawyer, Mary Costigan. This is a public proceeding, and unless the board specifically votes to go into executive session, you have the right to hear everything that is being said and to look at all the exhibits that are presented. Please notify the chairman if you're unable to hear or see. The board works from a published agenda and will be considering tonight's items in the following order. All I need is an agenda. We'll begin with the May 10th minutes. And new business will be an application by Highwire Hydroponics for an expansion. An application for a private way approval and extension by George Bennett has been tabled. So if anybody's here that was going to come to that discussion, it's not going to be had. Following, the next thing on the agenda is the workshop. That's why Mary Costigan is here to train us and whatever we need to know about conducting ourselves. Planner communications and adjournment. The first item on the agenda is the minutes from May 10th.
I move we accept the minutes of May 10th as presented.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? None opposed. The second item on the agenda is the I'll always get this wrong, Highwire Hydroponics application for an expansion. Well, they don't get it wrong anyway. We'll begin with Jim Seymour's coverage of the application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Highwire Hydroponics is here before you this evening for an extension of a road called Murray Drive. It's in an industrial park, one of the few we have in town. They're also planning for a new structure on the lot. They came to the board as a pre-application, I believe, back in February. They've gone back to the drafting board and they've come back with a new plan this evening. With that, we have some right-of-way extensions of Murray Drive from the next to last structure all the way back to where it goes outside of the industrial zone. There were several easements and cross easements that had to be addressed. They're in the process of cleaning that up. And Murray Drive itself was a gravel surface drive. At that pre-application meeting, the board discussed that it would like to see that paved and widened to Collector Street, which would be 22 feet. They have come back and have shown that. They are asking for a few waivers this evening. I do think also they're looking to extend the period of final paving and base paving out a little bit into the future, so that's another discussion we'll have to have. Rick Light is here to represent for the applicant. I've gone through the application. There are a few items which, after his presentation, and some questions that we can get into. One has to do with the fact that because it's an industrial zone, it's required to have, is it a 50-foot buffer. Because of the position of their proposed building, it would be in that buffer because of the shape of the lot. They also have reached an agreement on the lot adjacent to them, and they'll install that buffer, which is fine on the other property just on the south or the bottom of the page. In looking at that, though, there is one area where they have a detention pond, and that pond or that treatment pond has taken out a good chunk of that buffer, so that's one area that we need to look at. And there's a few other minor items that we'll go through as well. With that, it may be appropriate to have Mr. Light give his presentation.
Mr. Light.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Rick Light with Light Environmental Design, and behind me, the gentlemen from Highwire, Sean Haggerty, Jeff Buckley, and Adam Mappy, to answer questions as we go through the workshop at the public hearing. What I thought I would do is take a few minutes to actually talk about, I'm going to flip this back over again, Murray Drive, just kind of point people to where the project is, and then work my way into the project itself. And flip through a couple of boards here and there. Is this
Rick, microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are we on? Are we live? Good. Okay. Is this in a position that the camera can see okay? All right. So Murray Drive, the site we're looking at is lot 18F, which is called parcel B on this plan. They've also purchased, as you remember from sketch plan, parcel A across Murray Drive for hopefully a future, grow houses. But at this point, we're just looking at parcel B, which is lot 18F on the tax map. Murray Drive is about 1,200 feet from here to here, which has been gravelled, as you know, and 302's out here. The current operation is in the front building here, and again, the whole issue here is that they're trying to manage a retail operation by multiple storage locations within these storage bins, and it's just not very efficient. So the whole purpose of this new site is to basically make their, bring them up to speed, make a more efficient operation, and have a new storefront, and something they can really put their name on. So that's sort of the big picture. As we move into the site, I'm going to talk about the site first, and we'll get into the Murray Drive questions. The first thing that I want to show on the site here, this is that picture I just showed you, but the property line that I just referred to you does this right now. This line, this light line right here. So as part of this, we talked about the Murray Drive, that part of the Murray Drive was not located physically within the current easement / right-of-way. So what we talked about doing was, we've met on site, and I'm going to get into Murray Drive a little more in detail, with Jim, with Chris. We did some testing of the subgrade and sub-base materials. And what we thought we would do is try to take the alignment of the right-of-way easements and move them to more centrically locate around Murray Drive, and then widen Murray Drive where it needs to be to 22 feet, et cetera. So this is what we're actually calling the proposed property line, and land would be taken from this existing right-of-way, which I'll get into. So the site's about 1¼ acres, sliver more with this additional land added. And the concept of the plan is to have a retail and warehousing building of about 5,000, a little over 5,000 square feet. This would be a flat roof, single story retail at about 2,500, with a really neat geometric entry area here to really focus you as you come in. 18-car parking lot in front of the building, and with its own separate driveway. And then as you get further on, the warehousing facility, which would have a single door here and additional area back in here. This is designed so that a WB62, which I think we talked about in sketch plan, a full semi-trailer, can come in and back in and pull out again easily. And so it'll easily accommodate the fire equipment as well. And on the back side of the building here, there's the idea of a couple of storage bins, the concrete bins for the purpose of storing and selling loam, compost, that sort of thing. Dumpster pad in the area in the back here, maybe a 1,000-gallon propane above ground tank located behind the building, meeting NFPA 58 setbacks. And in the back of the building, it's kind of nice is to have an outdoor patio so people can come outside and have an area outside that's it's nice and sheltered and sunny in the back of the building. So it's sort of an area for the employees and for retail customers to meet outside. And what you see now, when you look at the site is essentially, there's a woods line somewhere in here, and we'd be cutting the woods line back a little bit based on the need to grade the site, and talk about the grading in a minute. And what happens is that a lot of this has already been cleared, and there's a low area down through here, and we're going to take that low area. It was evaluated by Rick Jones Associates and found not to be a wetland, but it's a low area where drainage from the road comes down to and exits the site. And we've designed that as an under-drain soil filter to meet DEP and town specifications for both quantity and quality stormwater treatment. And I'll get a little more into that in a minute. But the concept of the site has basically the retail side separated from the wholesale side, or from the warehousing side, other than folks that would come to buy compost and that sort of thing. So, that's one thing I'm going to get into on the site that I didn't put on the plan here. But the idea would be to have a sidewalk, ADA access into the front of the building and connecting over. And this allows, what isn't there now, is allows for a nice green space in front of the building. additional green space over in this part of the property, and then this would remain as green space back in here. The buffer requirement we talked about in sketch plan, that we were concerned about how we were going to meet that. There's a 50-foot buffer requirement in the ordinance for the setback. It's a buffer to the residential zone. This is the LRRA. This is industrial. We couldn't get the building to fit and meet. This is about 35 or 30 feet, a little bit less even. So what we've done is the applicants also have purchased this, or have under option or purchase the disc. I'm sorry, they purchased it, I should know that. They purchased this property here, so they're able to give themselves an easement, no-cut easement to meet that buffer requirement. So that satisfies that requirement, and we're able to utilize the site and keep back from the property line here. And we've met with the fire chief, Inspector Maines, and gone over the site, gone over fire protection. The site is not required to be sprinklered under an FPA code. It doesn't meet the 10,000 square foot requirement. But they're concerned they're going to have fire extinguishers within the building, and the local code does require a direct on-site alarm connection. That'll be installed. Secondarily, what we've done for turnaround for the larger vehicles is to take this little shadowed line here is that existing tote road that exists and goes across to this back residential lot back in here, and it cuts across lot 18F, like to 18E, excuse me. And what we're proposing is to basically make a turnaround of this geometry, which will fit the WB62 vehicle. And if you'll bear with me for just a second, I'll show you what that looks like on a different view here. And so this is a full semi-trailer doing a movement, and it can be done a lot tighter than this, I clue you. But this is sort of from a template standpoint, backing movement, either to come in and back in, pull out. You can do it either way, and it clearly has enough room to make that movement to get to the loading bay. And so that easily satisfies the fire chief's needs for their smaller equipment. And we've been out to their barn and measured up their equipment as well, their largest vehicle, which easily fits in that area. On-site septic and well, of course, we've got test pits in this area here. We're proposing a small leach field. There's not a whole lot of flow based on the small use of 6 employees, and a well somewhere in this area here, over 100 feet apart. From the site grading perspective, again, this part of the site here is sort of high and it drops off, and this area in here has been filled. So what we're proposing is actually bring in some additional fill, use this as the high point of the site to get into the building, and then maintain a new slope in here and dropping down into a stormwater facility. And what we've done is, in anticipation of the future development of this lot, we've met with the DEP to talk about stormwater permit requirements. And this lot by itself does not trigger stormwater permit, Chapter 500. But we know that if and when this happens, it will. So we want to think forward as a master plan. So what we've done is we've designed this to accommodate the portion of this lot that we figured would probably drain there, accounted for that amount of impervious that might drain there. Hopefully our calculations have allowed for enough, and for the additional turnaround. And so we've got a soil filter that meets the quantity and quality standards. And as well, we've done some improvements to the road drainage here, added some additional ditching, taking ditching, which now goes down this way, and kept it going around the basin, because we don't want to collect off-site runoff from the road into our basin, but there's a swale that currently goes through here that we're going to shift around the bottom of the basin and discharges off-site. So that accommodates both this site, hopefully the future site as well, and works out pretty nicely. From the perspective of lighting, we didn't really look at putting site lighting on the site. They wanted to keep this sort of subtle in the evenings, but the architect, Bob Foster, who is working on the building, has proposed some wall sconces on the building, downlit LEDs, and some can lights under the end of the canopies. They're very, very subtle lighting, but willing to have a conversation about that if there's any concerns about lighting. Let me just take a quick look at access. I wanted to get to a point on access that I failed to put on this plan. And one of Jim's comments, and I think we discussed it at the preliminary or sketch plan level, we know we've got a large throat here, larger than we'd like to have it. And I think Jim made a good comment about that we're doing it because we're trying to accommodate this activity here, as well as, in the area of the bins, you have to have room for a loader. Pull up your pickup truck, we've all done it. You need room to move around, and you can't be very tight with that. But I think, Jim, your suggestion was to cut this, to neck this down to about 70 feet, something like this.
Yeah.
And I intended to draft that on the plan. So I think we'll look at doing something like that. I think that'll work just fine, doing an island in there so you can still get in, maneuver, and that would reduce the throat down to about 70 feet, as you suggested. That was a good suggestion in your memo. Let me just talk quickly about the building, give you some eyewash on that, because I think it's pretty exciting building. This is the architect Bob Foster's perspective on an aerial perspective of the building. Again, you can see the sort of interesting geometry at the entry with a clear story on top for direct light, the patio out back, really an interesting entry area in the sidewalks, and then the warehousing beyond with a little higher ceiling height on the warehousing. The door to the, is a 12-foot door on the warehouse side? 14-foot? 14, probably a 14-foot door on the warehousing side. So that gives you a general perspective. And then just one of the building itself, from ground view, would look something like this here. The allowance for working with codes at the time on signage and allowances for signage on the building. So pretty interesting building, and it sort of gives them a real super, kind of a very clean identity to the new facility. So let's talk just for a minute about Murray Drive and what we've done and looked at on that, if you will bear with me. So Murray Drive. The road now, this is sort of a plan that suggests some easements and whatnot, but I'll try to follow through with the road. The road now comes in, and on these first 3 lots, it's within a 50-foot easement, so there's no right-of-way. There's an easement on this lot, 25 feet, an easement on this lot, 25 feet, all the way along, an easement here. So the road is within a right-of-way easement. As it gets to the back part of the property, I believe it's within a right-of-way owned by Richard Martin, and then there are easements for the various folks' driveways off of that right-of-way. So what we're proposing, and the Highwire folks have met and talked with all of the landowners here. We're working through a process with our attorney to come up with a letter of intent for them to basically sign off on easements to relocate the right-of-way. And that would involve, for instance, it doesn't show well where you're sitting, and I apologize, the facility back and through here, the driveway, there's an encroachment of the driveway on the corner of the lot over into the Bridges lot. This is the Bridges electric lot. These are the 2 parcels under consideration. And so to move the current right-of-way over to here, there would be an easement, a further easement onto this lot, shown in pink, for the benefit of anyone using the road. For this lot, the subject lot, by shifting the road over, they would actually gain land, the land in blue. And that would be land in fee simple given to this property, and so on and so forth. They would provide an easement for this turnaround on their lot until that lot is developed. And then along here, maybe we've suggested maybe a 10-foot grading easement to allow ditch improvements along the roadway. So those pieces, those sort of mechanical pieces, are in process now to be taken care of through easement deeds, and everyone seems pretty open to the whole idea. So the second piece was when we went out and looked at the roadway, and hopefully I've got the right plan here. I'm not sure how well this registers from where you're sitting, but we did look at the roadway, and as part of your drawing set for submission, we proposed to basically to re-shim the road. And again, what Jim had mentioned, what we propose in our application, I'd like to put forth to the Planning Board for consideration, is that because of the cost of doing these improvements relative to their site that was sort of unexpected, that if we could have some sort of condition that allows them to move forward with an improved gravel drive for a period of time, and at some time, time-sensitive future, pave the road, so that the owners, so that they can work out with the owners the cost sharing of that portion of it and reduce their front-end costs. We would certainly appreciate that. But the concept here, what it shows is improved radiuses at 302. The road itself now varies from, the narrowest part is probably 17, 18 feet, but most of it's 24 to 26. We did some test pits along the road. The gravel's very good, but there are also some larger stones in there in the subgrade, in the subbase. So we plan to meet with the contractor and figure out, how we want to work with that material. Again, whether the stones need to be removed or whether they can stay. If you're going to pave and you've got 8-inch stones below the surface a few inches, it's not a good idea until you remove those. So we're going to look at that, and that's identified in our road cross-section. But what we're looking at is a 22-foot travel way, again realigned so that it basically follows more or less where it is, but clean it up so it's more geometric. Some ditch improvements along the edge, just to clean out this ditch in through here. Little ditch improvements here, and a 2-foot gravel shoulder. And then coming up and basically terminating where it goes to the private residence just beyond the site up and through here. And from a profile perspective, if you've driven into the site, there's sort of a knob right here. And anywhere else in the state, I would guess that was probably a ledge knob. And of course up here it's Krogan, big sandy, bony soil, so it's good stuff. But we want to take, this is a good chance to take that knob out and smooth this up coming up this entry drive. I think we're at only 4.75%, and the rest of the drive would follow, shimming and everything else would follow basically the same grade, give or take a skosh. So that's sort of the idea with the roadway. So I think, let me just check my notes here, but I think, the one thing I did want to mention, and we talked to the fire chief about it, that they are planning on storing fertilizers out here, and they're aware of there's a 4,000 pound limit on our NFPA, and they'll be working with the chief. We've sent that message to the chief, and that does conform with current code. So they'll be in compliance with all the NFPA requirements and outside fertilizer storage requirements. So I think in a nutshell, that's the overview, and we'll welcome questions from the board or public and into the workshop.
Very good. Any board members have any questions or concerns?
I think the one thing you need to do is, if you feel it's appropriate, is deem the application complete.
Yeah. We have to decide whether application is complete, and you believe it is.
Yes, we do.
So we have to have a motion on that.
I move that we accept, make it official, the high wire hydroponics major subdivision plan.
Site plan.
Site plan. As complete.
Seconded and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Let's see, what do I do next?
Public.
Public.
Yep. I'll now open the public hearing with my wicked hammer. Is there anyone from the public who would wish to speak regarding this proposal? Seeing none, I'll declare the hearing closed. Now it's time to do the nuts and bolts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's obviously a lot of parts to this one. First, just for this clarity, even though it doesn't show on the zoning, Chris has confirmed that the zoning is 1,000 feet from 302. So that would bring it almost to the property line where that green clump of trees is on the left side of the property. So this is all an industrial. As I mentioned, one of the items that we need to kind of figure out what we want to do is, you see they got that dashed green line, which is the buffer on the property they own, but because the buffer is kind of disturbed by other grading activity to the right, it may be just easier to extend that 50-foot buffer all the way down. I don't know if they're amenable to that, but it's really not a true buffer because of the grading activity that they've done where that pond is going. So that's one thing. And Murray Drive is another whole long lineage of questions that I'm sure you might have. So I don't know where you want to start, if you want to go.
Well, I think let's start at the top in terms of the whole landscape preservation stuff, if that's okay.
Yep.
So what we're basically saying is you made the effort to comply with the 50-foot buffer, and I think what we're suggesting is that we extend that all the way across. And if you own that property, that shouldn't be a problem. If it's okay with you, we'd like to put a conditional approval that a deed restriction for that buffer be provided back to us in writing, and I think that would satisfy that need, correct?
I think you're right. I have another comment, though. The Skillins lot behind their lot, I think it's A on the northern side, they have to provide a 50-foot buffer there as well. That's a residential lot. And they are extending that turnaround into that lot 2, that lot A above.
Okay.
So I don't know, you've probably got it in that clump of trees.
Tame.
Oh, I'm sorry, the house back in here.
Right.
Correct, yep.
So, through the chair, I guess the question would be, the ordinance reads that it's, the buffer is to a residential zone. The zoning line is here. This is a residential house and industrial zone.
No, the industrial zone stops at that line.
Stops
Right
Right
there,
there.
right there.
here.
So that is in a residential zone.
So we need a 50-foot buffer.
Correct, yep.
That's not a problem.
Where the access goes through is fine,
Okay.
but just where there's no access.
So you just have to address that same way in a easement.
So where we're gonna cut the road off, the driveway off anyway, right? Let's make that a green space. This last 50 feet right here.
Okay.
Actually, it's the 50 feet going down
All the way
that
down.
way.
All, yeah,
All the
there
way
you go,
down.
yep.
This is an existing buffer.
Correct.
So that's not gonna change.
Okay. So with those two conditions, we meet all the setback and buffer requirements, and we'll make a note of those, and we're okay on that? Yeah? Okay, the other concern that's been raised is that pond at the end. And if we add that 50-foot all the way across the bottom, we should be okay, Chris?
Correct. Yeah. It's just a
So
continuation of
that takes care of,
You'll actually end up with a little bit more than 50, which is even better, but yes, correct,
Yep.
all the way.
This is a 40-foot, through the chair, this is a 40-foot, in order to meet the 50 foot, we just gave ourselves 40 feet, so we'll be well over 50. And we'll just extend the 40 feet of this orange line shows down the corner.
Correct.
yep,
Okay.
that would be good.
But there'll just have to be a 10-foot restriction on the inside as well.
And again, I think we've talked quite a bit about the fire department and codes and what the chief has said and what the inspector said. We just get something in writing to add to this packet so that we know we're all on the same page. Is that
A memo from the fire department?
a memo from the fire department? Yep. And basically, with the conversation we just had, the waiver for that cut is off the table because you're gonna accommodate the new, drop that down to 70 feet, and we've all agreed on that. We just need to make a note on the plan, correct?
Correct.
So the waiver, we don't need a waiver, so that's not a subject of discussion. I would like to say that personally, I'm really pleased with the future planning with the phosphorus and the water runoff. That just, I think, is gonna save a lot of hassle down the road, and it really puts us in good stead in that whole back area. So I would just like to say that I personally was very pleased to see that consideration in your plan. Of course, with our buffers, we've been talking a little bit about a catch basin at the northern side. With the changes that we've talked about, a catch basin be placed near the entrance on the lower northern side with curb.
Yeah, that's on that entrance to the parking lot itself. The water, what happens is the water runs out from that parking lot, and because there's a swale there, our concern was you might experience some washouts there, and they've got a line going across there anyway, because they're picking up water from a roof leader and then from a catch basin on the turnaround side.
Right.
So if they could just reroute things a little bit, they could curb that so that it would eliminate that washing, because we don't want that to get into the pond either.
Okay, and again, through the chair, yeah, we were just talking about that this afternoon, Jim. Are we clear, is it this area up here you're talking about?
Yeah,
Where
right
it begins to channelize here and head
Correct.
down this swale?
Yeah.
We don't, so you're talking about putting a curb radius into the parking
Well, I
lot,
was just talking about picking it up before it gets out into Murray Drive.
into Murray, from the high point. I see when it comes back this way.
Right, yep. Because it's coming from half of the parking lot rolling out into Murray Drive.
I see, okay. I see
So
what you
you've got a
mean.
line that kind of cuts right across that. With a little rerouting, you could put even a small F basin or something in there just to collect that water so it doesn't chew on that.
And discharge it down the swale.
Correct, right into that pipe. And
What about, we look at, just an alternative, what about a curb butt out with a riprap channel going to that, picking that up?
the only
Just to
problem,
keep it, so I'm just thinking about another catch basin and curbing out in the middle of nowhere where there's no other curbing other than on the site itself.
the only issue I have with that is in the wintertime, just that they do ice up and, become problematic when you plow. They get plugged up pretty quick, and then you've got a sheet of ice out there, and then when that cuts loose in the spring, you've got a soft
See what's
spot
talking
there.
about, adding just a catch basin at the entrance. You okay with that? A little section of pipe? Okay, yeah, we'll do that. So basically a catch basin somewhere here that pulls back off the edge of the pavement and tie it into the swale in here.
Right, you got, because you have that pipe that's coming across, so you
Yep.
can just kind of pivot that pipe to where you're gonna put the basin, and then take the basin and outlet it to where it goes now.
Okay.
Yep.
So it
Good.
doesn't really add any length of pipe, it's just the structure, really.
Which they have small, like an F basin.
Okay, so, we just want to put a note on the plan, I think, that's been recommended, that you do meet certainly local regulations for the stormwater management, and where this project is now, and include that future development may require those DEP permits, which we're all very well aware of. So we just want to make a note on the plan to that regard, so it doesn't get lost. And again, when we talk utilities, which is the next one down, and Jim's memo, we're talking about, again, that we need to be clear that both code enforcement, plumbing inspection will be required prior to construction regarding the utilities, the barrier or bollard to protect, right?
Yes, through the chair. I think, Jim, you were talking about protecting the propane tank being back in here above ground.
Correct.
Protecting that from somebody hitting the tank back in here.
Well, just to have clean access through there. It's
Yeah.
kind of a narrow stretch through there,
Yeah.
so in the wintertime, again, looking more at winter conditions,
Mm-hmm.
how are they gonna get back through there? Is there gonna be a path or something there? And don't wanna be driving over those septic lines that'll be through there either.
Right. I think what we might suggest, rather than boulders, we were thinking the same thing, is maybe we put a row of stone boulders out here so somebody couldn't drive over the system.
That
And then
works
just
fine.
shovel that out to the
That'd be
propane
fine.
tank. Okay. good.
Yeah, you might just wanna put a
Yes,
gravel,
yeah,
you might
we've
just wanna, you might just wanna put a gravel path
I'm
or
sure you
something.
Yeah.
got plenty of rocks.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
Small-
no shortage of
small-
rocks, I know that already.
Okay.
A small path for the propane.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, we believe, we're pretty confident that the setbacks with the tank and everything are good, but we want to make sure that that's covered by the fire department in their memo, just so that all parties are clear.
Do you, if you don't mind, do you have any concerns with the septic system? Are you gonna be H20 loading that? Because I don't know how big of a bins and things you're gonna have on top of that.
Through the chair, that would, yeah, definitely be H20 loading on the system here. We've
Okay.
allowed, in looking at our grades out there, we've allowed, in the test pits that we did, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I mean, seeing the site as it is, when you're on the site testing, and we might want to take a test pit and turn it 90 degrees if we can, but if it ends up this way, to be H20 loading, and we've done a preliminary design that with the grades we have, it will allow the extra 18 inches over a, like an infiltrator, or a concrete style structure. So we have the grades to make it H20
Okay.
either way. And honestly, I'd make it H20 anyway, in any area that's near
Right.
potential equipment, yeah.
So that'll all be through Chris anyway,
Mhm.
when it gets to that
Right.
point. But we just want to make a note that if it is in the travel surface, it should be H20.
Okay. And then I think another item that's been raised, again, back to the bins. We understand those are to be covered, and you referenced earlier in terms of code, and I think it was 2,000 pounds, and so we're kind of all on the same page with that. We just want to make sure that they're not considered combustible and that odors are going to be contained back there.
What is actually stored in those?
I feel like, yeah, peat, I mean, wouldn't be smelly stuff. Mulch, potentially, yeah.
At the worst, the compost.
Yeah. And a well-done compost pile doesn't smell.
Yeah, and the, as far as the bins, again, these are the storage, long compost bins here. The fertilizer, which I understand is at 4,000 pounds, this is a covered, an awning over a concrete, sort of like True Value has it out there, same idea, and that covered. And so that would meet the code requirement, that would be obviously review the chief when they occupy that, and so they can inspect to show that it meets the requirement, that it doesn't need additional fire protection for that.
Okay. The other item that staff has asked that we take a look at is, we need to get the lighting on the building on the plan, number one, just so that we're clear. And then there has been some discussion, and I know you're talking about the effect and you want a very subtle thing in the back there and it's gonna look all nice and everything, but any consideration for pole lighting at all back in there?
You have to have pole lighting?
Well, there is a requirement on off-street parking for a certain amount of illumination in the parking lot, and I'm just not sure what you have at this point. You may be able to do it with some wall packs on the building. I'm not sure. And again, I don't know what your hours of operation are going to be, in the winter, once anything after 4 o'clock, the lights come on. So that's the only concern. It's just that there's adequate lighting in
the
those
parking
public
lot.
spaces.
Yeah, if there has to be some poles out there at the corners of the parking lot, then I don't see a reason why we wouldn't do it.
Yeah. You might want it for security anyway, it's dark on the dead-end street there.
Full lights in the parking lot? Is that low-level LED lights?
Yeah, that's what
Okay.
some solar
Yeah.
stuff.
And then we'll show the on-building lights, which we apologize for. We eliminated our lighting cuts, but we sent those through the staff.
Yeah, we've seen the cuts, and they are full cutoff, so they're acceptable. It's just that we need to just see, and I assume it'd be very similar style for the LED. They're usually a flat lens cutoff, so I'm not really concerned. I think we just need to see the model and the location.
Okay. We also have, the next one would be the waiver request that we have here on the landscape plan. You're completing it as we speak. And you're requesting a waiver of the 26-day submittal timeline to allow that the plan be submitted separately. Does the board want to have any discussion on that? I mean, what do you think, Fred? I don't have any trouble
No,
with
we're
that.
not in trouble.
But it would be noted that we couldn't move down the road without submittal of that plan, correct?
Sorry.
I don't think the board has a problem with that, but wouldn't we make that a condition of moving forward?
Well, I guess
with
that's the
landscape?
discussion, is at what point do we want to have this completed, or to a point where, is it multiple phase where you do base paving and then final paving, and could we get base paving before occupancy and then maybe do final at a later date? Is there any discussion about how and when the road
Okay, so
phases?
we've got two issues, the actual landscape plan.
Right.
And then also your request to do the paving in 2 stages. So
Correct.
we actually have 2 items, 2
And there's
separate
actually another
items.
waiver in there for the shoulder widths, which is probably a little bit less of a concern, but the landscaping, they've asked for a waiver, but they've actually, tonight they've come in and they've actually shown us that they've got some.
Yeah,
Right.
to the chair, I guess the level is, what would the board prefer in terms of, landscaping, we're going to keep it sort of simplistic.
Mhm.
Do you need a full landscaping plan or a suggestion of landscaping styles that could be implemented during construction or review to the code officer? Whichever way is easier for you to do, we're fine either way.
I think with what you've provided this evening is
Yeah.
satisfactory, just
Yeah.
that we have the, obviously the size and dimensions of those,
Put those
and
on.
where, you can work with Chris or myself as far as if you get out there and you say, I want to move them 5 or 10 feet, that's
Yeah.
fine.
It's a simplistic plan.
I think as long as we've got the front of the building with some kind of presentation, we're satisfactory with that.
Does the board have any other comments on that, or are we okay with that?
The
I'm
landscaping.
okay with that.
Yeah, yeah, I think the board finds that acceptable. Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
you'll work with Chris on that? So it's really not a waiver, it's just that we're agreeing that you guys will work together.
Just a little more detail, like I said,
It's a
just to
little
give
more
us the
detail,
species
correct.
and the sizes that they're going to.
Correct.
Call that as a formal waiver.
Right.
Okay.
But the big formal waiver, well, there's 2. One is, again, this one's not a big one. The standard road size for collector calls for 5-foot shoulders. Due to their limitations of the existing roadway that they have, the physical spacing they have, a 5-foot shoulder really does create them a hardship
Yes,
to get the drainage and everything to work.
right.
If we go 22 feet with 2-foot shoulders, that gets us out to 26-foot wide road. That's more than acceptable for any industrial or emergency vehicle to get down there.
Right.
So I don't think staff is opposed to reducing that to 2 feet if it works within the confines of the easements and right-of-ways that they have.
Okay.
But I do think, with that point that you made earlier, we should get a comment from the fire department that they are also amenable to that.
Yeah, and as long as
But you can
we
make
have-
that
yeah.
waiver condition tonight with the fact that they follow up with a memo from the fire department.
And through the chair, what I just handed out, I just wanted to, when I got Jim's memo, and thanks for sending that over, Jim, I read through that, I thought, well, let me come prepared tonight, so at least there's something in writing formally requesting. What I've done is simply formalize the request of the 2-foot shoulder versus 5-foot shoulder, so that you actually have it in writing for tonight.
So I'd like to present a motion, if that's okay with the chair. I move that we approve the waiver of the Raymond Street standards to provide a 2-foot shoulder and a 22-foot travel lane conditional on acceptability with the fire department.
A second? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Okay.
I'm almost certain that
Yeah,
they've
I'm sure
looked
it's
at it,
gonna
I just
be
don't think
fine.
they formally have commented on it.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Now, the next piece has to deal with, it's not really a waiver, it's really a condition of acceptance and timing and everything, dealing with this road situation in
Right.
Murray Drive. Currently, it's gravel surface. With the pre-application, the board did, wish to have that paved. The question is, what is an acceptable period? Is it following construction? Is it before occupancy? I mean, we've got two different things. We've got a gravel surface, we've got potential for a base pavement, and then a final pavement. So there's 3 stages of this road that you could work with. Personally, what we typically see is that prior to occupancy, that the base pavement be placed. This one's a little bit different, so again,
Well, one thing I'd like to do is back up from that,
Okay.
because I think the first issue becomes the whole Murray Drive thing.
right.
And making a condition that all of this easement business, and one of the recommendations earlier is that this diagram be set up and to be signed and recorded, so that now, first of all, we have an official
Right.
road,
And I
correct?
think that's where we may end up in this evening. So I think the way I look at it is we're going to have a whole bunch of things that still need to be kind of cleaned up.
Yep,
So my suggestion would be to the board is, not give them kind of a roll call of where you're going with approval, but hold off until we see everything, because then we can do everything, and it gives us an opportunity to do the findings of fact, so we can kind of clean this
Okay.
up in one meeting, if that's
Does that work
amenable
for
to
you all?
you. Because there's going to be, and I do think one of the things we need to see is in writing the execution or near execution or agreements of all these easements, because
Correct.
everything's contingent upon
right.
on those. And I know they've worked and they've got verbal, but we need
Right.
something in
And
writing.
then the formal establishment of the road
Right.
association, so we have the future covered. Okay, so all we're saying at this point is we need to kind of come up with some time frames
Right.
to get that whole ball of wax back here to say, and do the findings of fact. Is that
Well,
correct?
and even with that, is that even if, because where we're going to be is it's going to be a condition of approval of the stages of the road.
Right.
Obviously, they have to go all the way back to 302 and bring this in, and what is it, Rick, roughly 1,000 feet?
1,200 feet or so.
Because you got the turnaround too and everything.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm sorry, 1,000 feet to here and 150 to there.
And so, I mean, they can present an option to us as far as, but I mean, like I said, we've got 3 stages, and typically what we like to see is the base pavement go down, that actually rest for a winter before we come back and do final. That's the ideal situation for road paving. The question is going to be is leaving that gravel acceptable while they're operating, and then how do we procure to make sure that they will come back, either setting up bonds or things like that, so that we have resources to know that it will be done.
And through the chair, I think what I'd like to propose, this is a little out there a little bit, but at least throw it out there, is because of the finances and then this sort of, the whole road thing, when, they bought the lot intending to do a business, and all of a sudden it's this wow factor. For the financial purposes and to get everybody on board, to all the owners through the association, and then we have a contractor look at the road.
Excuse me.
Bless you. Come up with a cost estimate so they know what they're into it for, each on a prorated basis. Well, I think what we'd like to suggest, if it's amenable to the board, is that they do the base pavement on their site when they do the site, and that they gravel the road, shim it, do the drainage, to the plans that we've developed into Chris and Jim's inspection, and then leave that for a year after occupancy, to give people time to get their finances together, and then do the base pavement and then the final pavement, if that's acceptable to the board. And let it run as a gravel road for an additional year after it's been improved, just from a financial consideration perspective. I don't know if that's agreeable or not.
We would want a letter of credit covering the cost of the asphalt.
Yep.
That's
That'd
what
be
we've done
acceptable?
in other projects, because
We're
if
acceptable
it
to
doesn't
that.
get done, then
So-
the town-
That's understood.
Yeah, so I think that
We're
putting all
acceptable.
that down in writing with some estimated timeframes
Yep.
of these dates, et cetera.
Okay.
And as Tim said, a letter of credit to cover the final project, just in case.
Mhm.
But of course, that won't happen. So that the town is assured that that road would be finished properly. Okay, so if we could get that, that would be in our final.
We're agreeable to that, thank you.
Yeah, and the only thing else we need with that is during that time frame when it was gravel, there may be a little more maintenance as far as keeping things clean, because you're going to have more sediment runoff from the gravel.
Yeah,
So just have to have a little uptick in maintenance.
okay.
I have one other comment, possibly, we may want to add a note. I've gotten quite a few questions about this since the public hearing was in the, I noticed in the paper, about the retail store and what that means. It's common knowledge that they have a medical marijuana operation on the site, and these retail sales are associated with that use. But because they have this retail store, if this gets approved at the planning board, the Board of Selectmen have adopted a policy that anything related to this kind of a use would have to come back to the board if recreational marijuana is approved for sale.
Correct.
So there should be some kind of a note on the plan that says, to that regard, that they will come back to the board if recreational gets approved and they want to do any other expansion or use of recreational marijuana. Because I think the
Is that fine?
public is a little bit confused when you see a retail store.
Yeah,
On
and the
the
medical
medical
versus
marijuana
the
site.
recreational
Yeah,
right
that's
now.
just
Makes all kinds of sense. Yeah,
Okay.
that's very good, that makes sense.
Maybe you could elaborate on what other things you sell besides fertilizer and compost. I think you can elaborate on that, or somebody could for the
Yeah,
public.
we have no intention of selling medical marijuana out of that facility whatsoever. What we sell currently is just the equipment to grow anything, basically, from the lights, even sometimes seeds, garden, tomato, lettuce, and all that. Air filtration, fertilizers for the plants, and then anything to grow, basically.
The propane that you're gonna have on site is gonna be for sale
The propane is going to be used for the building.
with no propane sales.
Not at this point, no.
I didn't have any intention.
And that might have been partially my fault. I think in our earlier meetings, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you're looking at selling CO2 inside the building for
Yeah.
filling tanks, CO2
Okay.
tanks inside the
Okay.
building, but not propane. And I might have misspoke at the sketch plan meeting, but
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you for clarifying.
One other comment that we did have a discussion with the fire department is, if this were a new industrial park, this would be required to have some sort of fire suppression, be it a wet pond, fire pond or tank. Because this is pre-existed, there's nothing the fire department can do. However, they did request that some kind of note also be put on the plan that if this industrial park is ever extended or expanded, that there would be a requirement for fire suppression.
Again, you don't have a problem with just a note on the plan with something like
Right.
that.
It's just so that, again, not sure how this happened and when it happened, but it probably
Right.
should have been noted at that time, but there's nothing much we can do about it at this point, and they meet all the state fire codes for what they're
Right, you
doing.
did reference putting in fire extinguishers and all those kinds of good things. And I think you'd want to do that just for the safety of your staff.
And through the chair, I guess, and we had that conversation, we met with the chief, with Inspector Maines, that, so if the current zoning line, industrial line, retail line is here, I think we're looking at, if this ever expanded into the back, there's like 40 acres back there, I think that's the intention. But this lot here is still within the current zone, as I understand it, so that
Right.
would be fine. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
And I think that's also important that, just so that we're all clear, if we could have some kind of, maybe work with Chris and come up with some line on the plan that actually shows where the zone, where that back industrial zone.
1,000
Yeah.
feet.
1,000
I think that would help everybody, yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would like to have that on ourselves.
And then the only other thing that I've got is, did you have a location for, I think you did, for a well on the,
Yeah, it's right in the rear.
Through the
Yeah.
chair, we do.
think it's right in the back, isn't it?
There's a well, side about 110,
right there, there it is,
somewhere
right there,
back in
okay,
here.
perfect.
Now, are you going to have any signage at the building itself?
On building.
I know you have signage out
On the
front
building.
on 302.
They did show it on the rendering, but
So you'd want to show if there's any freestanding signs that should be shown on the plan.
We currently show a sign here at the entrance, subject to, review with codes.
Yeah.
and-
Okay.
So, and I might as well bring this up, maybe it's related but not related in terms of signage. If they have a sign on 302, is that still permissible towards their sign allowances for this lot? I mean, is it considered an off-site sign or is it considered an on-site sign?
All signage has to be on the property.
On the property.
So if this retail store is advertising the retail sale, it'd have to be on that site or property that they own.
Property they own elsewhere in the.
I don't know, the property where the old store was, you own that too, right?
My family does.
So you could still, you could.
I'll have to dig into that a little bit
Okay,
more.
so-
Well, because we have the granite sign up.
Right.
That has all the little signs underneath it for all the.
Oh, it's like a marquee.
things on the property.
Mhm.
Yeah. I'll have to look at it. You're allowed to have up to a certain amount for each property
Mhm.
with, depending on how much road frontage you have. I think you have plenty of road frontage on Murray Drive to do the maximum signage on that lot. So I'll have to do a review of it.
Okay.
It doesn't look like you're excessive from what it looks
We
like.
don't do excessive signs here, but.
Okay. I just want to make sure there wasn't a preclusion of, and I've seen this happen before, where you want to put a sign on the highway, but your lot's back here and it's considered off premises. So I just want to make sure that's maybe something
That
you guys
is
review.
the ordinance.
Okay,
But they, considering they own the other piece,
you're allowed to do it.
we'll be able to
Okay.
figure it out.
You guys can sit down with Chris and look that up.
Okay. Are there
Anything else?
Anything else?
no, I think I think for Highwire and Rick, I think what you're seeing is that the board is, generally in favor of the project. We just have to tie up some loose ends, and with that, when we see those and when you can get them back, we'll schedule for a final hearing.
Right.
And what I'll try to do is prepare findings of fact. And if you could, the waiver that was granted should also be noted on the site plan.
Okay. And to the chair, I guess one question, in terms of timing, if we can wrap, most of these things are minor, we're just trying to get the group together with our legal counsel to work out the documents for the easements. What would be the latest date as a pending application we could get in for the next meeting for the, this is June,
July.
meeting?
It's not being public.
No public hearing, so
Be a week,
do we have to table the public hearing?
It's a good question. If they make any
Because they're
substantive
going to be
changes.
making changes.
If
they'd
they
have to
make
be open for
substantive
public
changes.
hearing again.
Not substantive.
If there's substantive changes, we,
But they're not subs,
Not
they're all minor
So just,
things.
yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think a public hearing is necessary. I know
If they were
there's a lawyer
substantive,
over
we
there
would,
going,
but
yeah,
we're-
Yeah.
They're not even making changes.
Right,
No.
they're just really kind of
They're-
cleaning it up.
They're clarifying
Tying up
and,
the sound.
right, so,
If they come in and the neighbors can't agree and all of a sudden Murray Road is changed in a different location.
That's a
and if
different
he just
issue.
steps in and-
Well, Chris and I would also have, some authority to say, okay, this went too far,
Yep.
there's too much of a
Right.
change, and we could then request another public hearing.
so how
But-
many days in advance would they need to get us the
I think
materials?
he's trying
Chris?
to,
I'm trying to figure it out.
probably, the next meeting is.
So the next meeting would be July 12th. So you'd have to submit by June 21st.
Or we could go, well, we don't have public hearing, so we could,
Go to the 28th.
28.
28th, June 28th.
Okay, we'll try.
I'll confirm that with you, Rick, tomorrow.
Okay, thank you, appreciate you sending me that. I know you've got your table in the book.
Yeah, but where it's old business and we don't have to notify for public hearing, saves us a little aggravation as far as.
Good. So, thank you, no more comments, but thank you for working with us on this. It's been very collaborative, and I appreciate your memo, Jim, it's pretty straightforward. And I think we'll do I've got my notes. What I might do is, before we submit, just kind of go through and make sure I send you a note, making sure that my notes met with your notes, and I didn't miss something.
Okay.
Sounds like a plan.
Sounds like a plan.
Great. Thank
Great.
you very much.
We'll see you in July.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the next item on the list, the workshop. Words of wisdom of Mary.
Educate us, Matt, educate us.
Do they want to, they can do anything with the bylaws, or they can do that now?
She's gonna do a workshop.
No, but what about the vote?
Comment? Greg, were you gonna make a comment about the election?
Yeah, I should have earlier. Anybody in the audience notice that the board looks a little different? The chairman, Bob O'Neill, my brain isn't functioning. His last meeting was last month. Bruce Sanford is gone, I think, to Indiana. His family, where?
Iowa.
Iowa.
It's all the
Far
same.
away, anyway.
Illinois.
And he's the vice chair, so I am the most senior member, so I am the chairman of the day. So normally in June, we have the elections of the officers for the planning board, and we are going to postpone that till July when Bruce is back and the whole board is here. So that's the way that is. Anything else I should say?
No, now just open it up to the workshop.
Okay,
All right.
it's Mary's turn.
So I'm going to hit some larger topics and then just take any questions that you have. If I am talking about something, if you have any question about that, just raise your hand. This is just a free-flowing conversation. This is not meant to just be.
Could I ask one question before we dive in?
Yeah.
Since we passed all the revisions, which is mostly editing and moving things around at town meeting, when will we get the revised stuff?
Well, it takes at least a month, maybe 6 weeks.
Okay, I'm just curious.
Because we have that done by an outside agency. GPCOG does that for us.
Okay.
And it's going to be dependent on their schedule.
Yeah.
So we'll get the information to them next week, and hopefully we get it soon,
Maybe by the August meeting?
probably.
Yeah.
And
It'll
we'll
make our
print out-
lives a little easier too.
We'll print out the revised ordinance with, Article 10, where it says it's Article 9, we'll fix that.
Yeah.
And then the fire protection ordinance, we got to clean some of that up too.
Okay,
So we'll try to get you a nice, clean set of ordinances by August.
thank you.
All right, excellent. So, if you don't know already, you're all members of a public board. And it's important, and generally your job is to review applications that are presented to you in an unbiased and transparent manner, just applying the standards in front of you. And no matter whether you like something or you don't like something, if you find that it meets the letter of the law, then you approve the project. And that's just, it's very, if you just look at your job that way, and I just always start that way because, something like this, you don't have a room packed full of people who hate something. It's easier for you to do your job, but you may find yourself sitting there and people being really upset with you about a certain development they don't like, or the developer may be upset with you because you don't, his or her application is not meeting the standards, but you can keep a really objective role about it if you just think of your job as, there's nothing I can do. Somebody else wrote the rules, the town voted those rules in, and these are the rules that I have to apply and work with. And if they meet the standards, they get their permit, and that's the end of the story. So that's just kind of like my big picture role of your job. But your job is public. And so there's two major topics I always talk to about boards. One is the Freedom of Access Act. You usually think about that probably with public records. Somebody wants to see a copy of an application. But where it applies to you most is in public proceedings. So what that means is the Freedom of Access Act requires that if there are 3 or more people who are on a board who are meeting to talk about substantive matters, that meeting must be noticed to the public, and the public must have the opportunity to bear witness to that conversation, essentially. It doesn't mean that the public has the right to comment every time, but they have the right to be in the room and listen to the conversation. Your business is supposed to take place in the public. So if 3 or more of you are going to get together to talk about something substantively, it's a meeting, notice it. If you run into each other at the gas station, you can talk about the weather, but you should not be talking about the next application on the agenda. You shouldn't have email conversations. That's the same thing as a meeting. You can have email conversations about the next meeting and time and availability and quorum and all of that kind of stuff, but you can't have any substantive conversations in an email correspondence. If there are, it's very rare that a planning board gets in a situation where you feel you need an executive session. That's the limited list of exceptions to the public proceeding where you can go behind closed doors and have a meeting. Probably one of the ones that applies the most in a planning board is if you need to talk to your lawyer about your rights and responsibilities. If you feel that something's kind of gone awry, and there are times when if it's a contested proceeding, and you want to make sure that you're doing something right, but you don't really want to ask that question in public because it may interfere, legally. It may put you in a legally difficult position. It's still very rare, but that is an option in those executive sessions.
Again, in most of our meetings, we don't have the benefit of counsel readily available. In an event where we felt like that, because I recognize whatever we discuss and all of that can set lots of wheels in motion inadvertently. What do we do? I mean, if we really felt that, wait a minute, we're skating out here somewhere, or we're not comfortable with what's going on, what would the board do at that point?
Well, I think what we do, we'd advise you if you start feeling uncomfortable about a situation that, one, you table it and get legal advice.
So we could actually say,
you can, absolutely.
The chair could turn to the board and say, or a board member could say, I would like a motion to table this until a future date, and we could do something like that.
Yeah, and that applies whether, one, you feel you need an executive session, or two, if you have, it happens a lot where you don't even know, you'll get 2 lawyers showing up representing 2 parties, and you don't have a lawyer at the table, and they're both talking to you, and you don't know what the answer is, and you do not have to know the answer. You can say, thank you very much, we're going to postpone our decision making, we're going to bring this question to the town attorney, and then we'll revisit this at our next meeting. Okay. And that happens a lot.
Just one other question too. She mentioned about 3 or more board members, but it is okay for an individual board member to reach to Chris or myself for discussion, right?
Yes. Yep.
So I know sometimes you have a question about something.
Technical guidance, or I'm not quite sure what this is saying to me. Does it relate to this ordinance or that ordinance?
Correct.
That kind of thing.
Exactly. On that topic as well too is site visits. Mm-hmm. So if 3 or more of you are going on to a site visit, it should be publicly noticed, and the public should have the opportunity to come with you. It's highly recommended that all site visits, that the public is told very clearly that this is just informational for the board to take in information, that there'll be no questions taken, that there will be no discussion. I recommend that even the board is not having a discussion. You ask questions, you get information, and then you come back to this room that night or the next time, and then you have your substantive discussion about it.
Do we need to keep minutes of site walks?
No, because you just have to, keep a minute of the meeting that happened at a certain place, but minutes really only are reflective of who was there, when was it, and what the motions were.
Right.
The actual requirements of a recording of a meeting are very, very minimal.
Okay. I know we had one in the past, but for some reason, we were doing minutes.
Yeah, there has to be a record that it happened and
Right.
who was there
Right.
and where it was.
I think one of the challenges I often see in minutes is people try to put in too much of the discussion,
Right.
which can also create inadvertent issues. Really, all you have to do is who was there, what was the motion, what was the vote.
What was the vote? Yeah.
That's the only requirement, including executive sessions, right?
And to the point Mary was
Well, there's
making.
no votes in executive sessions.
Oh,
We had a site visit in the past where there was a large crowd and they had attorneys.
oh wow.
So you may be at a site walk where attorneys show up.
I'm not coming.
So
Well, there was,
it happened.
it was probably 3 or 4 attorneys all told.
But again, we would only be there as information gatherers, so we don't have to deal with that.
And
Right.
usually either Jim or I will be on the site walk and we usually instruct the board what protocol is for the site walk. I review that at all site walks.
Okay.
And kind of slipping onto another topic is the site walk that you can't make, right? We have a game to go to and you can't go to the site walk and you want to know if you can just drive by the property by yourself and see what it looks like and see what the deal is. You certainly can. There's nothing stopping you from going and kind of making sure that you have an understanding of what the site looks like. But when you come to the meeting, you want to put on the public record that you visited the site on such and such a date, and you were there by yourself, or you were there, your dog, and that you observed the site, just so it's on the record.
Okay.
It's important that information that you can use your own knowledge, of course, to analyze whether an application meets the standards. But you can't be out gathering information outside of this room and basing your decision on all of that information that you've gathered if you're not presenting it to this room. If you want research done, you ask Jim or Chris to do the research for you. If you feel there's a topic that you need more information on, staff should be doing the research and then bringing it to the meeting. And that's how you're not the researchers, you can't testify, you can't provide evidence. But if you need more information, ask the staff to do it, or ask the applicant if they are going to provide more information,
Mhm.
and they'll come and provide you with that.
Because again, our role is to make decisions based on what's presented in this room,
Exactly.
not because we read a newspaper article about X, Y, and Z.
But where we all come from different backgrounds, different professions, we all may have information that you have, but you can't share unless you ask us to
Yeah, I think
present
where, for me, it gets a little bit tricky is, and where I see that come more into play is in waiver requests, where maybe your personal perspective is a little bit more out front because you're asking us to waive a requirement. And that sometimes, I think we just have to be careful how we put our questions, et cetera, and something like that.
And it also happens that we've had cases where people have brought their own studies
Yes.
Sure, you can't do that.
technical manuals, and they want to contradict something being presented. That would be fine if they presented it to us to present to you, so you all had it. But at the
Right.
night of a meeting, bringing that up, it's a biased, that you can't, it's a biased thing. You don't have time to review that and be able to answer.
Exactly, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Also on the topic of public proceedings, no ex parte communications, meaning you can't talk to the applicant directly. You are
To
the
the chair.
decision makers. Staff can talk to the applicant directly, but the applicant shouldn't be calling you up or emailing you and asking you're not select board, you can't be lobbied, you can't be, no one can buy you a cup of coffee to talk to you about their development proposal. That is, because this is a quasi-legislative body, or judicial body, you can't be having those types of conversations with applicants.
Mary, I have a question for you. As a contractor
Yeah.
in the town, as a general contractor, an excavation contractor, eventually some projects are going to be coming across the planning board. I think that's kind of, inevitable at this point.
Yeah.
How does that relate to me and my role as the board? Because there'll be times
Yeah.
where there might be something that isn't for the planning board, ready for the planning board yet. I get called out, say, hey, can you do a site walk and evaluate our situation? So I would then have kind of some more of that information that we just talked about from a technical perspective,
Right.
from my profession. Where does that line set? You know, how do I go about that? So, you know, this guy comes to me and says, hey, we have a subdivision, this is what we're doing, it's in the works right now. So I meet with him, I give him some advice, and then it moves into a situation where it needs to be viewed at the planning board level. Where do I find my distinction there, and how do I make sure that I don't cross that
Sure.
line?
That's getting us into conflict of interest, which is
Okay.
my next broad topic.
Sure.
So freedom of access and conflict of interest. So that's a great question. Let me just make sure I
Sure.
finish all of the stuff from freedom of access, which I think I have. I just want to go through my list,
Absolutely.
and then we'll move on.
Great.
It's a good transition. 3 or more persons, no ex parte, record. We talked about that. Yeah, you guys, we covered all of this stuff. I mean, you guys have great staff here. They help you with your written decisions. But the other part of a public process is your decision is public, and it should be in writing. Statutes, there are some statutes, like the Administrative Procedures Act, make sure that you have a written decision for all denials. So if you're an applicant, you know why your project is denied. But the local ordinances in both land use, shoreline zoning, and subdivision require written decisions. So you'll be, with assistance, writing those findings of fact, so both the applicant and interested parties understand why you reached the decision that you did. And again, you guys have a good model to go with, and so I haven't seen any issues there. But that's important to make sure that your decision is in writing and you have time limitations, et cetera, in the ordinance about when you need to get those to the applicant. You also have to remember, I talked about, there's public proceedings and there's public records. So if you're using your personal email account, or you have documents here and you take them home, those are public documents. So if somebody submits a request to Town Hall to see all application materials and decision materials related to this application tonight, and you have emails in your Gmail about it, that's a public document that you're going to be asked to print out and turn over.
How about personal notes, things like this, and that I write during a meeting or leading up to it while I'm studying the materials? Is that also public?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it depends.
Yeah.
If it's meaningful, it has to be documents that are kept in the regular course of business. Your own personal notes to remind you of something. If you're taking notes for the board, you're the secretary, or you're drafting a decision, those are important.
Well, I highlight things to
that's
take important points that I'm going to
that's not required.
concentrate on.
You could even jot down a note or something on the side too.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, usually what happens is at the end of any application, the staff will make sure that they have one copy of everything in Town Hall. And if you have anything important that you don't want to keep at home and you want to make sure that it's in the record and the file, you put all that stuff in the file, and anything else that's kind of irrelevant to the decision can be.
And we will know, by the proceedings, if something's going to be contentious, that sharpens us up a little bit too, to make sure that we're
Right.
going, when it's like tonight and there's nobody here, it's a little bit easier, you're a little more relaxed, but when you know that there's somebody out there who may be against a project, not that we're changing anything, but we're going to be much more careful about the content and notes and everything like that.
One of the things that I do is, once the finding of facts are rendered on whatever it is, I take all of this and destroy it. Because I'm like, it's done, it's over.
It's done. Right. As long as there is a copy
At the town.
at
Right.
the town. Yeah. And as long as you don't have anything important in there that's unique to this room that should be part of the file. Yep.
I don't have enough room in my house for all this stuff.
Yeah, I was on a board for 7 years. I had it all in my basement. It was when you get big rolls of plans. It's
In my office.
All right. So now we'll move on to conflict of interest. So you have the direct test of conflict of interest, and I'll read it to you because it's so exciting, is if you are directly or indirectly the owner of at least 10% of the stock of the private corporation or own at least 10% interest in the business or other economic entity. So that's like test number one. There are a million different tests, but this is actual conflict of interest, is if you had 10% in the hydroponic company that was here today, you could not sit on that board.
Sure.
And that's a simple test.
You just
You recuse yourself from
for that
the
discussion.
proceeding, for that application.
Okay.
Another test is if that was your son sitting there and he was the applicant, you would recuse yourself. If that was your grandson or your brother, you would recuse yourself. If it's your third cousin, second removed, you don't have to recuse yourself.
But but it does not hurt though to at least bring that forward to the board.
Well, that's going to get me too. So these are like there are actual rules for conflict of interest, and those are really the two rules. You own interest in the company, that's the applicant, or you're related to the applicant.
Okay.
That's conflict of interest. Then you have the gray squishy area of bias, which is what you're talking about,
Sure.
right? So bias is if you have information that may lean you a certain way, that you have a certain relationship with an applicant, that you have certain knowledge. And what you do in those circumstances, if it's a gray area, you would say, the applicant would come in and you would say, for the record, I want everyone to know that I did go out onto this site last year and had a discussion with this guy. I feel, I'm just saying in this circumstance, I feel that I can make an unbiased decision. I don't really know the specifics about this project, but I just want everyone to know that I was out there. And then the board will take a vote as to whether they think you should recuse yourself or not.
Okay.
Or you may have a circumstance where you say, you know what, I talked to Jim last month about this. I know a lot of specifics about the information. I've kind of formed an opinion of this, and even though I'm not directly involved in this, I really feel like I can't make an unbiased decision. I'm going to recuse myself.
Okay.
But any situation like that, your third cousin, your whatever information that you think the board needs to know, you always just bring it up, you talk about it, and you vote, and you either say yes, yay or nay, you stay or you go. And that's how it works. And other things come into play with when you think about bias. It is if someone is either an applicant or an interested party and they want to appeal your decision, they will tell the court that their constitutional rights were violated because they did not get a fair and impartial decision maker. And so it's statements like, I would hope that no one's sitting up there and making a statement, but again, it happens where someone sits there and says, I hate Walmart. I don't want this thing to go through, and you're sitting on the board. Or you have like I hate Walmart bumper sticker on your car and you're driving up and you're making this decision. Even though you don't own stock in, that wouldn't work that you own stock in Walmart, you wouldn't hate it. But you don't own stock in the neighboring competing mom and pop store that's next door. There are things that have an appearance of a conflict that can actually result in a finding of you being biased and having a non-impartial decision. And
So the whole concept of you can be absolutely right and honest, but be perceived as not.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
best to declare and then some kind step back, just because it prevents problems.
Sure.
Particularly if there's a
Exactly.
contentious issue, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Now, for instance, what if Kyle I'm just using you here, was under contract with an applicant, but he wasn't working on the specific project? He's got a financial relationship. Is that conflict of interest? Could that be considered bias?
It's bias
Yeah.
because you don't. You're really the only direct pecuniary interest that is a qualification for recusal is that 10% interest in the company. But you'd want to, in that circumstance, you'd want to reveal that, you're working with this company on a different project. But, you know, in small towns and
It happens a lot.
It
It does.
happens a lot, where I know Joe, he married my sister, but they got
You might have
divorced
done
and-
tree
It
work,
happened to me.
you've done tree work, or
And
you've
I-
done
I
some
just
digging, or a
disclosed-
test
You just
pit, or whatever.
disclosed,
Right.
yeah.
Everything about it, nobody
Disclose,
challenged.
discuss,
Right.
and vote.
So just err on the side of caution. If there's
Always.
a relationship there, just make
Yeah,
it
just talk
clear.
about it.
Then, you know, what, and then recuse myself if that's the way
Yeah.
the board feels about it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep,
Perfect.
yep. Yeah, I mean, those are the big topics. Are there other things that you think we need to talk about?
Unless they have questions.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think a good rule of thumb too is to, sort of what Jim was saying, not that you should be lax by any means, anytime there's an application, but when, it's almost like you should practice for those really contentious ones by making sure you always dot the i's and cross the t's, you know?
Fry Island was my tutorial moment.
It was training,
It was
training.
training day.
Came in on that one, so.
Yep, yep. So, and you know, it's not an easy job. There's tons of standards, and so luckily you have Jim laying them all
Yeah,
out.
it seems like, at least so far my experience here is it's usually not them coming at us, but us saying, you can't do that, you
Yeah.
know?
Right, yeah.
Where, you know, we have this very explicit set of guidelines and they just don't want to follow them. And it's
Right,
like, well,
yeah.
what do you want? I mean, it's hard sometimes for me to keep the frustration out of my voice in those situations.
Mhm.
It's like, you know, you gotta do what you gotta do.
Right,
and
If you don't want it, then I guess we can't help you.
And if we
Yeah.
see as a staff too, if we see a situation where there's a standard or something that's being not challenged, but there's just issues with it, that's when we can open up a board workshop and we can all discuss, is there some areas we need to improve within the ordinance?
Exactly.
And go through that whole process, so,
Right.
I mean,
Like
just
the
because
whole
you do have an
backlot driveway,
opinion,
yeah.
doesn't mean it gets shelved forever. You're allowed at some point, we can come back and discuss that as a
Right.
possible ordinance change.
Yeah, but I've never seen where we've been unreasonable,
Right.
if the spirit is being followed,
Yep.
that we're unreasonable.
And that's why we have the findings, so that, you know, obviously if something does come back or somebody does challenge it, we can fall back on the findings.
Right, and you know, it's a good point that if you have a really frustrated applicant and you're frustrated too, because maybe what they're proposing makes complete practical sense, but it just doesn't meet the standard. You'll find that sometimes, and then the answer is, we're sorry, we can't approve this, but we might be able to work with you in the future about amending this ordinance in a way that makes better sense. And because people, I mean, a lot of people don't really understand how it all works.
Right.
And that there are ordinances that are written, they're voted on at town meeting, and those are the laws.
Right.
And if you don't like the law, change it if you can, and try to change it.
Well, and I think a lot of times what happens is people come with the old in their mind, like they were here 15 years ago and these were the rules.
Mhm.
And so why can't I just keep doing by those rules?
Right.
And, you know, it's like if you open it up, now the new rules apply. I learned that in the bathroom wall recently, you know. I took that wall down, now I go to the new rules. So, and I think that's really tough for both
Right.
sides. You know, you feel for them, but at the same time, that's why we have the ordinances.
Right. Yeah.
If in our review of the applications, we come up with a technical question that, you know, we feel would be important to know the answer to
Mhm.
in order to make a decision, how do we go about getting that information? I could have one, I probably had one for this meeting, but I probably shouldn't speak it at this point because
If you have a question, you're allowed to ask staff.
Ask staff.
Okay,
Yeah.
You can say, you know, ahead of time, call us,
so
email
I
us.
could just call you guys and.
Right, you just say, hey, I have a question, clarification, or, you know, I don't know if I truly understand this correctly, or can we extrapolate this a little bit more, or I feel like I need a little more information to make
But
this.
then they'll bring that information to the meeting.
Right,
Okay.
Or we'll
Yeah,
bring it
'cause I
back to
knew
the
it-
applicant.
I knew it had to somehow get to the applicant's attention, but I didn't know if it should have been done during the meeting, which didn't seem the right way to do it. To ask
Right, well, I mean,
technical
there's
questions.
various situations, right? So if you're looking at something at home and you're like, I don't really understand this, you can send Chris an email or Jim an email that says, like, I don't understand this. So at the meeting, can you bring this information and explain it to me better? And then because you all need to get that information. I mean, you're not having a public proceeding, but you're gathering information outside the public process. So you should be gathering the information in the process.
Or you could even ask the applicant, you know, I was looking at this in the standard, can you explain how you meet this? A little more clarity.
Right, so that's one situation is beforehand. The other situation is when you're at the meeting, you can either ask for clarification from either staff or the applicant, and if you still don't have enough information, you can say, I'm not ready to vote on this, so if you need to come back at the next meeting with this information.
Okay.
Well, the other
So
thing
you
I
guys
think
agree.
that's important to note, and Jim usually says it in every memo, is that this is our recommendation. It doesn't mean that we have to agree with it or follow it.
Right, yeah.
You make the decision, I don't. I just guide you and give you some background, and you're the actual decision maker.
Yeah, I've seen the board disagree with Jim.
Yep.
Once.
Once.
Yep. Any other questions?
No? You good there, Pink?
I've seen the board disagree.
Very
Everybody
quiet.
good?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of this.
That's true.
And me.
Yeah, yep.
Thank you, Mary. When are you
You're
gonna come
welcome.
visit us again?
Oh, next
Whenever we
time
invite
have
you,
something
right?
heated.
I hope that's a long time.
I hope so.
But if you
Oh,
find
planning
yourself,
communications.
like generally, if you find yourself with just some like random legal questions, we're there. I mean, you
Yep.
can pass those questions through staff, and we can get you your answers. So it doesn't have you don't have to wait until we're at a meeting. You know, if you have a question about a conflict, to ask Chris to ask us. And,
Great.
and we can-
That's helpful.
Okay.
Planner communications, do we have?
right now, we've got.
Thank you, Mary.
Welcome.
This could potentially be back in
Thank you,
July.
Mary.
We
You're
have
welcome.
one other private,
We've got one,
not backlot of staff.
that's staff.
Okay, and the other one would be planning board, that's private road. We have another private road
Private road.
coming forward, not
The one that was tabled.
not the one that's tabled, but there's another one. That one's a little more straightforward, I think.
Talking about Tenny Hill.
No, Steinway,
Oh, Steinlaw.
yeah.
And then we got the subdivision one for
Oh, right.
49 Tenny Hill.
Yes, we have an amended subdivision, and that one's a little more complicated. It was nothing that the applicant has done, but it has to do with some titles and title companies and some lot splitting, and they're definitely the victim in this case, and we're trying to rectify it, but it's rather confusing. It looks simple on paper, but it's a little more, you know, in the title world, it's a little more complicated. So we have to amend the actual subdivision of that one.
Okay.
Did you have a sense about Bartlett? Are they gonna try
I
to come
think
back?
Bartlett's at a stalemate at this
Yeah.
point.
He's having problems getting the easement signed off on.
And our Danielle, our member-to-be, hasn't been confirmed. That's
She'll be at
correct.
the selectmen's meeting next week,
Yep,
So she will be here in July.
July.
good.
And we will,
And Bruce will be back in July.
Yep.
So how do we conduct elections? How does that work? This will be
basically, you'll have an acting chair, and you'll open it up for discussion about who would like to be nominated or who you'd like to nominate, just like any other situation, and just hold a simple vote like you would any applicant.
Is it proper to nominate yourself?
You could if you wanted to. There's nothing.
Yeah, you can do that. That's not
See why not.
against Robert's rules, for sure.
It's exactly, use Robert's rules, and,
Yep.
and then you'd go to the vice chair.
So chair, vice chair.
And that's essentially it.
Okay.
And that's good for how much? 2? 3?
I honestly don't know without looking at the bylaws.
I think it's 2. Can't
I
remember.
thought it was like 3, but
Was it 3? It's good for a quite extended period of time, so it doesn't, unless somebody leaves, it doesn't really
Right,
roll back
'cause,
around. Because you all
since
have
I've been on
different,
the board, we've
you all
never
have
done
different
it.
dates of,
Yeah.
you know.
Okay. Cool.
Actually, they do it annually for the board chair. Take that back. Your positions are certainly, the board chairs every year.
Every year.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, sorry.
Our
every
positions
year.
are depending on
You're-
when we
yeah,
were
exactly.
appointed and
That's
all
what I
that
was thinking.
stuff.
But no, the
And
board
I
chairs.
trust somebody at the town.
It's usually in June every year, right after the town meeting, we do the chair and vice chair. And usually it just rolls over if they stay on.
Yeah,
But it doesn't have to, you can move on.
okay.
Right,
Says you have the election every,
Annually.
annually.
annual.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. All right, we need another motion.
I move that we adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye, aye.